Hi there. I'm Brianna Bowling, and I am the founder of Retreat and Learn. If you want to know more about hosting a live retreat for your company or your team at our farm overlooking the Potomac River near Washington, D.C., you can visit us at retreatandlearn.com. And of course, you know the drill. Subscribe and follow our page if you want to see other informative interviews. Today's guest is Melanie Upright. She is the author of More Time to Lead, The Principal's Guide to Empower Teachers, Successful Students, and Satisfied Parents. And she's also the creator of the Four Perspectives Framework. There's so many educators resigning, and the reasons they cite are that there's too much work, there's too little support, there's too little resources. But Melanie questioned if those concerns were not the real reason that educators left. And she wanted to come up with a plan and a solution to keep them thriving in the classroom. So she wrote this great book. And I know you and I both have so many questions and we're ready to learn. So we're going to get right to it. But before we do, I do want to make note that if you have any questions while we're live, you can post them in the comments, either in YouTube or Facebook, and we will address them while we are live. So with that said, I'm going to welcome Melanie to the stage. Hey, welcome. Hey, Melanie.
Hello. Hi there. Thank you, Brianna. That was such a generous introduction. I appreciate it.
Oh, I am so glad you're here. I mean, this is such a frustration for so many educators, and you have so much to offer them. So I really just wanted to know, I mean, I've read your book, and a lot of other people have too, but what actually drove you to write the book? I mean, it takes a lot of time to write a book. Why did you do this?
Yes, it takes a lot of time to write a book. And for me, I love education so much. It's been one of the best decisions I think I ever made to go into this education space. But what I find is that there's a lot of dissatisfaction there. It's almost inhospitable in many different ways. So what I wanted to do was to share all of the discoveries that I've made over my career in terms of what were the conditions that created success for students. It allowed educators to love their work and ultimately addressed the questions parents had. So that's what drove me.
All right. I mean, it's a great reason. And part of this, and I don't know if you came up with these four perspectives before you wrote the book or if that was part of the evolution of the book, but you came up with these four perspectives that kind of drove the structure of this book. And we'll get into those four structures or what those four perspectives are. But the first one was effective teams. And I know in your book, you talked about this, a woman named Christine, who is also a speech language pathologist. And, you know, in the story, she's very new to her position. She's super excited. And then she's not, mainly because she just didn't have the tools to create an effective team. So I was wondering if you could discuss a little bit about that first perspective of effective teams and how maybe it helped Christine and other people that you worked with.
Absolutely. Well, effective teams is one of those. It's actually, I believe, the foundation through which we experience the great potential that education has for students. So, through coming together, collaborating with each other, we can really mobilize resources in a way that working side by or in a silo or working on our own, we're not able to do as effectively. So effective teams basically talks about how do we connect with other people in a way that allows us to solve these big challenges of education. And it's actually not a negotiable area in education, yet it feels like it's less important than, say, the curriculum or having planning time or other aspects that we're much more versed in. Being able to be part of a team to solve problems is really what creates the opportunity. So I don't know if I hit it enough for you, but I will tell you that in every one of my examples that I share in the book, there is that element of collaboration. And that collaboration either comes through formal teams or it comes through really robust partnerships.
Yeah, and I think one of the great things about your book, the thing that I liked most is that you didn't just say, "Hey, have effective teams." What you did was you gave them really concrete terms and different ways of doing it. So I think what we're going to do for this interview is I'd like to go through those four perspectives one by one, but I really want to come back to that effective teams when we're done going through the perspectives so that we can actually give out some of those tools that you gave in your book. So let's get the second perspective, and then we're definitely coming back to effective teams because that's my favorite part. So, what is the second perspective?
The second perspective addresses systems thinking. So this is one where it is a little bit harder for the teacher in the classroom to maybe see a connection to what he or she is doing. It's definitely the perspective that the central office or state and district leaders are going to be talking through. But what I have noticed in my interactions with educators as a resource teacher, as a speech pathology coordinator, and also as a grant manager is that the understanding that big picture provides a framework through which we can take small steps forward without having an understanding of what does the change process look like, what could we expect and understand is going to happen in a predictable fashion related to supports for students. It can feel very isolated. And so teachers, they say that all the time, I'm all by myself, there's nobody there to help me. Well, through a systems thinking perspective, we're going to tackle problems by understanding where within that system we're operating essentially. And then the complementary side to that is recognizing that the student operates almost in a separate system of himself, him or herself. And so, that student, when we're solving a problem that they can't read, well, they can't read, so they need an intervention. Okay, that makes sense. But also, what happens then while they're going through that lengthy process of learning how to read through an intervention? What do they do inside the classroom? How does this now impact them at home when they're doing homework? How does this impact them as a member of a community? And so when a teacher has that whole child, the whole life cycle of a student in mind, we're going to come to the task of responding to parents' questions differently. We're going to come to the task of going to those individuals in the school that are there to help us, like your resource teachers or special educators or your administrators, through a very different lens. So keeping that bigger, broader relationship in mind for students is this really, it seems separate, but it's this empowering state that changes what a teacher is going to be saying and how they're going to be hearing the things that are happening. I'll just say one other thing. There are three primary areas for systems that we would want all teachers to just feel strong in, and that's that base level tier 1 universal design for learning. And this is a lifetime pursuit of understanding. It's not a one-time thing. And I think that part is frustrating. And I understand that for sure. The second step would be mobilizing resources in the RTI or MTSS models.
I'm sorry, what's RTI? What's MTSS? I don't know what those stand for.
You don't. I appreciate you. Response to intervention and multi-tiered systems of support. So it's a framework that, folks in academia have identified as an organized way for us to move through time to help students and to give them different intensities of supports to allow us to talk differently about how do we group kids, what are the answers to challenges based on what the evidence tells us. So we understanding what that looks like, what it should be looking like, again, is going to change what a teacher might say as it relates to the kind of help they're asking for. And then finally, of course, is the IEP process directed by
IEP,
individualized education program. Okay. And it's directed by a concept called least restrictive environment. So that area there, that system of just understanding what special education services look like, that is an area that creates a lot of frustration for teachers. So I'm going
to interrupt you here real quick, because what I'm hearing, and I'm not a teacher, I'm not an educator, I'm not in the system, right? Mm-hmm. But I was an educator listening to this, and I'm brand new to the system. I've just become a teacher. What I'm hearing is, okay, I just told you I'm frustrated. I feel alone. I feel overwhelmed. And now you're telling me I need to learn all these systems and I need to understand all these different things. Is this really going to make my life better? And that would be my feeling. And I don't know if that's valid. Maybe I'm not in the education system and I don't understand, but that's what I'd be feeling.
And it's, again, a really amazing point, Brianna. This is where that team-based model comes in, because teachers do generally feel like they're on their own, but they don't have to be. And again, when we look at where the greatest momentum occurs for students, where the change process occurs, you see robust grade level planning happening. You see diverse interdisciplinary teams coming together to solve problems. But the challenge that teachers face is that these are usually launched because of significant problems that have come up. And so this model, the Four Perspectives models, is really talking about where are the areas that if we devote additional time to gaining some new understandings, we will now have a way of launching education every school year a little bit differently to mitigate some of those challenges. I can't wait, though, for us to get back and talk about the teams.
We are, and we will. And I want to get through this so we can.
Yeah.
And I think this reminds me of, it's kind of like when I first hired my very first assistant, and I had started a company, and I was so overwhelmed with work, right? I was so busy. And my poor assistant's sitting over there going, give me something to do. And I'm like, I don't have time. I don't have time to give you anything. And I think probably learning these tools probably feels like that too to a teacher. In the end, when I started handing work over and doing things, it made my life better. But it's an investment into future happiness, basically, and future feeling less alone. And so I can see that.
Yes.
So, all right, let's hit the third perspective.
Yes, the diverse classroom. So this one is very related to systems thinking, except that it talks to us about the predictability in the variation of learners. Teachers have this drive and this passion to provide information and give opportunities and cultivate the development of new skills with their students. And they come to education so lit up. And then what they find is that the classroom is made up of kids that are coming from lots of different backgrounds. They come with a very wide range of strengths and weaknesses. And that lesson plan, that ideal lesson plan that they could see, being delivered and really exciting their kids, it falls flat. And then they're like, where do I go from here? Mm-hmm. This piece really talks to the idea that there is a predictable nature. And when education makes that shift and says, okay, we're going to have transitions that we have to move to the bathroom, or we have to transition to, in and out of the school during the day, thinking about an elementary school, that we know a good portion of that class is going to be fine. They're going to follow the teacher's verbal directions and everything's going to go off without a hitch. And then you're going to have a segment of the students who need a lot of coaching. They need practice learning what the expectations are. So it's about mitigating the frustration and the stress that a teacher is going to experience when you have those students who we know are going to be there, right? Yes, right. The range and the kids' distribution of strengths and weaknesses it's so interesting to look at. You'll have a student who's a high reader, strong in mathematics, but poor social skills or poor ability to attend or understand, how to regulate their behavior. And then you can have the flip. You can have a student who's amazing when it comes to transitions and attention and all those areas, but really struggling in reading. So to make that classroom run a little bit more smoothly, we should always be looking at how do we tailor to a child who's going to struggle just a little bit, and how do we tailor to that child who's going to be a little bit above our expectations for that age. And when we do that, we are going to take care of a little bit of. It's still not going to hit everything, which is again where the team comes in.
Work in progress. Always work in progress. We're always trying to improve.
Absolutely.
Very good. All right. So we have one more perspective left, and then we're going to get back to the actual real tools that are really going to help some people. So go ahead. What's the fourth one?
The fourth perspective is evidence-based practice. So that one can for a lot of educators feel like a dirty word because we've been held accountable and responsible to this for a really long time, and it's super frustrating because whose definition of evidence-based practice, and does it mean it has to be a packaged program, and what exactly are we talking about? And I think that is essentially why I chose to include that in the four perspectives. Is yes, having teams is important. Yes, understanding how you're going to move a child through the system in order to be able to help them is important. And having a plan that's going to accommodate lots of different learning styles. But without the solid evidence-based practice, all that other stuff can only take you so far. So there is a slide I sent you. Let's see, a picture I sent you. It is from the give me two shakes here to remind
That's okay. I'm
myself.
gonna look too. I
Yeah,
believe it has a bunch of links to it.
it maybe has a bunch of links to it. It is from, this is the one, right? So it's really messy. And these links are in my book, but the National Council for Teacher Quality is one example. So this group went and researched what are the teacher preparation programs teaching new to the field educators. And what they found is that the key evidence-based practices that are guaranteed to change trajectory for students may not even be in the materials that are presented to new teachers. So when you think about evidence-based practice, there are these core foundational tools that we really have to own, and own with a deep knowledge base. So when we learn about pairing graphics with words, what are all the different ways that's going to look like in the classroom? And that aspect is something then that you go and you talk to your resource teacher about. You say to the speech pathologist, I need help with those visual supports to unpack, the words that I'm saying to the students. And when you have now this arsenal of visual ways of representing visually, whether it's a graphic organizer or it's, using literally pictures to help with, you're suddenly going to feel this sense of, okay, now I know what to do. This kid can't do it right now. I can really quickly draw this, or I can pull out this graphic organizer. These key ones right here, these are just 6, but there is through the What Works Clearinghouse, the IES practice guides, that's our tax dollars pulling together the best of the best research, meta-analyses around what do teachers who actually move learning for kids know. They put it all together right there for you. So if you were going to
put links in the comments too for people too, for sure. And I want to make sure we leave time to get back to those tools. But if I could, I'm not an educator, so I'm coming at this interview probably in an interesting way. Is that evidence-based practice to me is really, it's not reinventing the wheel. It's taking the successes and the failures of people before us and going, hey, what can I take from that so I'm not having to reinvent the wheel? And that makes a lot of sense. Take these links and learn from other people's mistakes and their successes and move forward with it.
Right. Well, and it's exciting to be there when the students and your lesson is going more smoothly, to watch just, how that teacher now can step more into a facilitator role, as opposed to having to be, micromanaging and controlling every last thing in the classroom. It's the mobilizing of these evidence-based practices that frees up the time of the educator in the classroom to be able to think through what is it they want to do, actually, to be able to have fun in their lessons. And that's really what I want them to have.
It is.
Yeah. So I could talk.
All right. So we're going to get back to the actual tools. But before we do that, I just want to remind that if you are watching this live, and even if you're watching it later, you can post questions in the comments. While we're going to answer them live today, Melanie is an immensely generous person, and I'm sure if you post questions in the comments, she will answer them as well later too. But we do have 2 questions that I do want to go ahead and address before we move on to back to the first perspective. And I love this question because I think it's a great one. What do you think is the biggest challenge that teachers are facing right now as they get ready to launch a new school year? And I don't know if there's an answer to that. There's so many, but if you had to name one, what would it be?
Well, I love this question, and it's coming from a brilliant person that's in my life. Dr. Jennifer Dale is with the All Learners Network, which is a really potent organization that is coming up with solutions that address access to mathematics for all students, regardless of what their challenges are. So I appreciate the question, Dr. Dale. The number one concern that I have is that students are coming with pretty extensive social emotional needs, and that inclusive, the diverse classroom that includes this lens, this focus on how do we teach expectations? How do we help students to manage their emotions, to recognize that they're even experiencing emotion and then put some words to that piece is going to need to be infused within all of the instruction, not just a designated time during the day that they teach a social skills lesson. So for me, it's really recognizing that we're in a unique place, and our students that are brilliant, they're so smart. Brianna, do you know that they learn everything from YouTube? And they know,
yes, they're smart people, no doubt.
I mean, when we were in elementary and middle, and they know everything. And
Right.
So what they don't know, though, is how to do that emotional regulation piece. So.
Yeah. And it's been hard. I mean, I think it's been in a very unique and challenging environment for our school kids for the last couple of years. So it wasn't great before then. That's definitely been unique this year. Jennifer also had a follow-up question to that too. So now that you know the biggest challenge, what type of training do schools need to implement the 4 perspectives that you've laid out?
Yeah, that is also
these are big questions.
This is a hard ball. That's a hard bar thought. Okay, well, here's the thing. Firstly, I think there can be a school level approach to this, so that schools currently, I'm supporting a school in DC, and what we're doing is systematically working through each of the perspectives, and we're engaging in our reflection around our own classrooms, and looking in a really organized high level, we're coming together as that school to work on it. But there are pieces, and that's where, when we get back to the talking about teams, that I want to talk with you about how can you as that individual, because starting teams, when it's your principal that sets you in a team, that's one thing. When it's you in the classroom having to solve these challenges, where's the starting point? And so that having that initial on your own plan of how do I begin to look differently at some of the decisions that have to be made, that's something I want to just talk a little bit about.
Let's do that. Let's get into some of those tools. We have probably 7 more minutes left, but if you have any other questions, people, feel free to post them. But let's get into some of those tools. What's the one tool, since we only have not too much longer? Let's hit 2 tools at least. What are the tools that you want to discuss for sure?
Well, so the effective teams possess a knowledge of this area called core competencies. The core competencies will create psychological safety. So if anybody follows me, or I'm hoping folks will decide to follow me on LinkedIn, you're going to notice I'm always commenting on anyone who's talking about psychological safety, because it's something that we say, but there's a lot of action behind it. And so understanding what needs to go into creating an environment where there's psychological safety, I just want to talk a little bit about that. So the core competencies, such as interprofessional communication, or even taking it to a much more personal level, that interpersonal communication is an area that we can begin developing, that then is that it's the actions that then will move us into readiness to be able to collaborate with others. So, and these again are lifetime skills that we develop. It's not like any teacher doesn't have the ability to communicate. I don't think you go into teaching if you can't communicate. So clearly you already have some base skills. But communicating and participating on a team with another professional means we're going to be looking at it through a little bit different lens. One of the things that I do in my workshops is I have my teams pair up, my participants pair up, and they do this activity where for 1 minute, one person talks. We give a topic. Sometimes it's about a challenge. Sometimes it might just be about vacation. It just all depends on the group I'm talking to. And the other person just has to listen for a minute.
That's
And
hard.
then they rotate, and they have to, so they each get a chance to feel what it feels like to be the speaker and what it feels like to be the listener. And then we have our little, what did you notice? And every time, firstly, the room erupts in an enormous laughter because it is the most awkward thing to go through. But the ahas that come, like they say things like, I wanted to ask questions, and I was noticing her facial expressions, and I didn't understand what she was saying with the face she was making. Well, those ahas, that little task of just challenging yourself to just listen, tells you a little something about how the brain works. The brain can think much faster than it can speak. And so, as a listener, if you are really in that collaborative mindset, you're going to have to slow yourself down and don't jump to those conclusions or fill in the blanks for someone or ask a question that derails the conversation down another path.
Right.
And those are the things that, when you talk about interpersonal communication and how that can change how resources come to you. And I'm talking about physical, like people resources, because that's the number one thing teachers should come away from this, is that there is enormous resource available for you in your school, but we have to be able to get that resource to come to us. And so part of that is in how we listen, how we ask questions, and coming to the table acknowledging that we don't have the answer. And
Vulnerability. It's sating. I mean, it's really, really hard to say, you know what, especially in a situation where it's a professional situation where it matters if you know what you're doing, right? I mean, nobody wants to say, hey, look, I'm teaching, but I'm not perfect at it. And I don't exactly know what I need. I need help. That's hard.
terribly hard. And it is ultimately the biggest barrier that people, not just teachers, people have to deal with, is feeling like someone's going to be judging me or I'm supposed to be a certain way. We just want you to have everything you need in your classroom. And so to avoid closing the door before we've even had an opportunity to try to help you solve those problems. So,
Melanie, I have a question about that. So, I didn't think about this until just now, is that having that vulnerability, the willingness to say, hey, I need help. What can administrators do to create a culture where people, the educators, the teachers in the classroom, feel comfortable doing that?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, modeling that and being that good communication model. So I had shared with you something from Jim Knight's work. He is an instructional coach, and it's called The Checklist for Listening and Questioning Effectively. Principles. Anybody who's looking to be in leadership really should develop coaching skills. So learning how to ask those questions. So exactly. So here's a really potent question. Ask, and what else? So again, you're opening space for the educator to share with you what really is going on, because sometimes it gets in the way, right? Like our frustrations, the first thing we say is often not really what we need help with. And so giving, that prompt to say, keep talking, let me hear more from you. So we would want our administrators to have the core set of coaching skills that opens up a free dialogue and allows people permission to say things. I think the other thing about this checklist that I really appreciate is it is something where you could take one area and you could just explore it. And so
Mhm.
as an administrator, you could say, am I non-judgmental? And you could spend the week thinking about your response to what people bring to you. And am I doing that in a way where I'm open to hearing anything and everything? Or am I automatically, with my quick thinking processes, launching into one, I've already solved the problem. I've decided you're not doing something right. I need to tell somebody else they're not doing something. Like, where's your head taking this?
Right.
So having, this a simple, easy to access, and again, that's the thing. A lot of the solutions that are going to make education better for educators, for administrators, for parents, they are easily accessible. They're posted out there on their web. They've been researched and researched and researched, and we get kind of the bells and whistles of something new takes us down these other paths. Well, this core of what creates hospitable, inclusive, exciting places to work in education, that hasn't changed. We have to continue to embrace and develop those skills. And it's definitely accessible. Working with teachers for years, I can tell you this is something that you can do and you can find that success.
That's really, really good to know. I mean, I think, and unfortunately, I always say these interviews go so quickly, and we are actually over at a time, whatever, if that's a real word. But so we do need to wrap things up. But I mean, I'll let you finish off with a couple things. I'm going to ask you one more question. But there are so many great tools that Melanie puts in her book. I mean, I really, really highly recommend you guys go and purchase her book. I'll put her LinkedIn. I'll put the link to her Amazon book, the Amazon link for it. There's just so many tools besides the one where she does the listening tool. And even if you're not an educator, I can tell you, I ran a software engineering company. I could take a lot of those communication tools and apply them into my workplace. So really recommend following up by reading the book and reaching out to Melanie. Is there anything that you want to add before we wrap up?
Education is the best place to work, period. I know you're technology, Brianna, but I'm just going to tell you, if ever you want to make a difference in the world and you want to help other people, education is the place to do it. And I just want to congratulate all these the educators out there who have found their way to education. It's hard right now, and it feels like the type of changes that are coming are really the barriers are just insurmountable. And possibly for select individuals, this will not be where you stay. But I do want to encourage you to just reach out, and I'd be happy to talk with anyone who wants to just be excited about education, because that's who I am. I love it.
I am so glad you shared all of these tools. I did put her LinkedIn link here. I will also put it in the comments later. Thank you, everybody, for joining in today. Thank you, Melanie, for your time and your generous sharing of your knowledge. And thank you to our educators. I mean, just like Melanie said, you guys are the heroes of the world. You're the one who are making our world a better place by making better students and better adults later. So really bravo to you. And so thank you. And and stay tuned. Subscribe to my channel too. We have all kinds of great interviews. If there's something that you want to learn, if there's something that wow, how does that happen? Send me it to me. I'll probably interview somebody about it. So, that's my education. Great. So thanks very much, Melanie. And we will see you guys soon. Thanks.
Bye-bye.